Welcome, everyone. Good morning, noon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I am Dr. Bushra Anjum, and I'm the host for ACM-W Celebrating Technology Leaders web series. This series is designed to demystify various career options. In each episode, we invite women leaders who have been successfully architecting their careers in computing. Today, we are focusing on careers in machine learning, and we have a wonderful panel arranged for you. A few logistical reminders. I will be facilitating the discussion for the first 45 minutes. The final 15 minutes are for you to ask any questions. You can do so by typing them in the Q&A widget and clicking submit. Please feel free to write in and send your questions throughout the discussion. Also, on the bottom panel, you will find a number of social widgets, including Twitter and sharing apps. We encourage you to share any nuggets you find useful in this discussion with your social networks. Thank you for spending the next hour with us here. We will make every effort to make it worth your while. So today we have with us Dr. Fatma Tardasi, who is machine learning scientist with OpenTeams. We have Koyuki Nakamori, who is the head of machine learning with Headspace. We have Dr. Divya Janapa, who is a machine learning research scientist at Thomson Reuters. And we have Dr. Dafna Shahaf, who is an associate professor focused on data science at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So let's learn more about them, from them. Fatma, if I may start with you, you have an interdisciplinary background. How has it guided your way to where you are today?
Thank you, Bushra, for the question, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So yes, I received my Ph.D. in comparative literature before I went back to graduate school and to study computer science. And as unorthodox as this transition might sound to a lot of people, I can certainly say that I leverage a great deal from my training in humanities and academic research today in the job that I am doing, whether it is in the form of critical thinking or abstract thinking, or more generally knowing more in detail about social sciences really helps me in my day-to-day job, I should say. To give you a quick example, since I mainly specialize in natural language processing, knowing about linguistics, cultures, and how natural languages are actually dynamic structures as opposed to being static things that stay the same, it actually helps me and informs my decisions and the methodologies that I use when I take on a technical problem. And it also helps me, I think, the more I do this job, the more I realize that I am able to see some weaknesses and maybe oversights that the current and existing NLP tools and algorithms might have when I'm trying to use them. So just a quick example of this, but I think when it comes to AI or ML today, an interdisciplinary approach is a necessity as we researchers and practitioners build algorithms and tools that impact different domains of knowledge and areas. I think I might have a little bit of an advantage in that regard.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important for our audience to know that how different paths, different academic paths, all can lead towards careers in data science and machine learning.
Absolutely.
Koyuki, if I may ask you next, what is it about machine learning that intrigued you, and what are some of the pivotal moments in your career which led you to your current position at Headspace?
Thank you so much for the time, right? I mean, so many pivotal points, moments, right? So, and by the way, I'm Koyuki Nakamori. I'm the head of AI and ML for this company called Headspace. You might have heard of Headspace. It's this meditation app, awesome meditation app. Check it out, right? I think that one, right, why I am, interested in ML and AI is just the speed by which it's growing, right? It's evolving, right? So you can say there are constantly so many publications, papers, new algos getting published every week, every day. It's very hard to keep up. But I love that about ML and AI, just how passionate, right, people are towards ML right now. We all know that AI is this inevitable wave that we have to ride, right, to stay even relevant, not even ahead of the game, but relevant. And actually, Forbes, there's a really interesting article. It's by 2030, AI is going to generate at least $15.7 trillion opportunities, right, globally. So think about that. We're only scratching the surface, right? So I think that there's just so many things that can be done, right? And that is just the opportunity, right? Thinking about that opportunity, the potential of AI and ML gets me excited, right? And you can see my passion, and you can see my excitement here, right? So by training, by the way, I studied mathematics, operations research, as well as statistics, right? So that was like 10 years ago. We didn't have this term, DS, so that makes me feel old, but we didn't have this term, data science. So at the time, I was doing OR, or operations research, which is about optimization, simulation, all that, right? At the time, we didn't really have the computational power to really, feel all of these, computations that what is required for AI and ML today. So, but now we do, right? So I think that is another thing that gets me really, really excited about. It's like, hey, we can scale anyway, right? I mean, I use AWS every day, but it's like, hey, vertically, horizontally, it's like, hey, we're going serverless. It's like computation is not going to be an issue, right? So that really is another thing that gets me really excited about. And also I think that my career trajectory is very interesting. It's like, hey, I started as this, analyst in, analytics or reporting. So, and then I got into data science through a job, right? So looking at more the predictions, right, into the future. And then later I got into ML, right? Hey, how do we create this end-to-end ML pipelines and infrastructure, pretty much like having more engineering chops, right, under my belt. And then I got into AI, right? So it's kind of like this like natural funnel, if you will, right, that I actually have gone through. And yeah, I think that the future is definitely AI and ML. And then I think that a lot of people say, hey, is that hope or is that dread? Because people are like, hey, like what if AI is taking over the world? But I really think that AI, or the future is what we create, right, is what we will, right? So I think that we kind of have to be optimistic, right, about this, but also understanding the framework where AI can survive ethically and responsibly, right? So all of those things, I think that obviously Google and all these big companies are leading the pack, right? But we cannot be quiet about all of these things that we're seeing, right? So the bias that the model might have, in that we might detect, right? So I think that we need to be actively working on those issues. And that's another thing I get really excited about. So, I mean, you can see that there are endless things that I get excited about, but I really think that the opportunity is just, sky's the limit. We can do so much. And then I'm just so happy that you guys are interested in this topic. So that's like a long-winded answer to your question.
No, that was beautifully phrased, and there were so many good points in there that we would like to unpack for the remainder of the hour. Divya, how did your background and interests lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you, Bushra, and hello, everyone. So I've always been a language lover, and I came to machine learning because I love languages, and through natural language processing, I came into machine learning. So talking about my experience, I received both my master's and bachelor's in India in computer science, and my projects were in networks and cryptography. So I was that kind of computer networks and cryptography person. And right after my master's, I was working as a lecturer in India for 2 years, during which I happened to attend a natural language processing workshop. So when I was doing my master's or bachelor's, like machine learning was not a big thing. Like it's not like what's happening now. So like, so I came to know about this new area of research about NLP and stuff. And I always knew that I'll do PhD at some point of time in my life, given my career, because I was a lecturer. And when I attended this workshop, I was thinking maybe I should do a PhD in NLP, but I did not have any experience. So I self-taught myself NLP, like reading books and blogs and things like that. And so I was trying to get a PhD admission in India, but as I did not have prior experience, and the process is kind of different where you have to write multiple exams in India, I couldn't get a PhD admission in India. And I was kind of very frustrated. And during this time, like I was thinking, and like my family and my husband was saying, why don't you just give it a try, like somewhere in a place like the US? And so my thought was like I couldn't get an admission in India. how can I even get one in the US? Or I was also thinking, is it even possible given I have a very small child? My child was like 3 months old when all this happened. But then we were thinking that it's a decision we need to take after we get the admission. So we just tried for it. I went for it. I found a wonderful supervisor and I got the admission. And then by the time I received the admission, I was like, I am going for this. And that is how I ended up in machine learning, natural language processing PhD. I was not so fascinated about machine learning, to be honest. It was about language. The subject, the work that I will be doing was fun for me rather than the results from the model. And by the time I was about to graduate, then I wanted to decide where I have to go. Am I going to go to industry or am I going to be in academia? I knew that I love research. I wanted to stay in natural language processing research. And like you, Bushra, like I was also thinking, I'm always in academia. I have taught in India and I have taught in the US schools during my PhD. I was thinking, what's in these industries? What are these people doing in industries? I should probably go in there and understand what they're doing. So I decided to apply for industry positions, provided they are very research oriented. And I was narrowing my search. I only went for places, or I only applied for places where they wanted natural language processing researchers. And I ended up in Thomson Reuters as a research scientist, and current now I'm working on natural language processing problems. We work on legal NLP stuff. So basically everything that we do in NLP, like classifications, text generation, search stuff, but on legal cases, like the cases from courts. So this is my experience, and this is how I landed up in an NLP research job at Thomson Reuters.
Thank you so much, Divya, for sharing that. And that is one thing one myth we would like to dismiss or dispel as part of this series is that PhD does not make you this does not make your options limited. PhD actually creates more options for you. So I have a PhD in computer science, but I'm working in the industry. Divya has a PhD. She's working as a research scientist and again in the industry. Fatma has a PhD. She's on the industry side. And Dafna has a PhD and she's working in academia. So all these different options just open up for you. So don't think PhD limits you in any way. It creates options for you that you perhaps didn't even realize existed. And talking about academia and Dafna, please, your journey. I believe you started with another field and then moved towards machine learning.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you know how so many friends of mine, their father is a professor, their grandfather is a professor, they had their entire life planned since they were like 3 years old. And for me, the path was kind of the opposite. Even going back to my undergrad, I showed up on campus like 2 weeks after the semester had already started and like, hey, I want to register to something. And the admin goes like, okay, so what do you have in mind? And I'm like, actually, that's a really good question. What majors do you have? And she looks at me like I was out of my mind. Like in my defense, I was kind of young and clueless. And I ended up taking math and computer science. But in reality, I think I have the same problem as Kayuko. Like everything excites me. So my entire undergrad was me going to the admins again, saying something like, hey, I saw this class. It looks awesome. I really want to take it. I know it has nothing whatsoever to do with my syllabus, but pretty please. And amazingly, it worked. Like they just let me have all the fun I wanted, which means I took a really unusual mix of classes. And when it was time to do my master's, I kind of, had to converge, and I ended up deciding to do AI, but it was not machine learning yet. It was good old-fashioned AI, logic-based. Until there was one point where my advisor wanted me to use my work and apply for a military grant. And I actually thought about it and was like, it's logic. It's going to work if the enemy has like 4 tanks and they're completely deterministic, which made me realize that I really want to work on stuff that's, more uncertainty, more noise, larger scale, that really got me to machine learning. And this was also, by the way, the motivation that throughout my entire grad school, I kept in touch with industry, internships, stuff like this, to make sure I was actually working on stuff that's important to somebody, in this universe. And anyway, long story short, now I'm a professor. I'm working on all those things that people traditionally think machines cannot do, like a sense of humor or creativity. My other hat, I'm the co-director of our data science center. I'm also advising, I'm consulting for companies, I'm helping local startups, basically doing too much for my own good, I guess. That's about it.
Lovely to hear that, all the different avenues you're involved with. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing about your background and journeys. So let's dive right into the question, which is also part of our part of our session title, that looking beyond the hype. So really, what is hype versus reality in the machine learning field? I'm talking more in terms of careers. What do people expect, and what is it actually like in the machine learning careers in the field? Let's start with Dafna.
Oh, I think I have the perfect example for this. So at Carnegie Mellon, my advisor was giving the machine learning class, which was the most popular class on campus by far. Like everybody wanted to take it, even the kids from our school. So there was basically a waiting list from hell. And at some point, he gets an email from a student saying, I have to take machine learning. Machine learning is my life. Pretty please, this is my last semester. This is my only hope. And you know, my advisor is nice, so he lets them in. And 2 weeks later, this guy quits the class. And we get really angry at him because we actually had to spend some effort to squeeze him in. And we asked him to come to our office. And my advisor asked him, so what went wrong? And the guy just looks him blank, like in the eye, and said, you know, I used to think machine learning was magic. Turns out it's only math. Like, okay, get out. But it's true because too many people have this idea of, you know, we're going to get this magic box called machine learning and everything is going to work out fine, and then they get disappointed when life is more complicated. So.
Machine learning is not magic, it's math. I love that. I'm going to tweet it afterwards. Divya?
Yeah, I echo everything Dafna said. Like, yeah, it's funny how people think that you take a bunch of features, you put inside the computer, and it's going to give you like 9% or whatever it is. But like, like Dafna must know, as she's working on humor, things like it is so hard. Sometimes, like when we do error analysis, we think that why is the machine not even able to capture this? This is too simple. So that is where machine learning is. There are some tasks where machines like perform really well, things like analyzing a large set of data. So, but then I don't think some of my family members or my like far friends who are not into machine learning think the AI is going to take over the world. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. We have a long way to go, and we are struggling in some trivial tasks, but we are doing really good in some very difficult tasks that are difficult for humans. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Fatma?
So in addition to what Dafna and Devi have already mentioned, I think one of the other things that I hear a lot, and probably is like a lot of assumptions play into that, is you can now, like, we have all these great tools and frameworks and algorithms and libraries that we can use to plug and play, and it just magically works. But most of the time, I think a lot of practitioners who are new to the field come to realize that they actually need to understand that abstractions and what's going on behind it. And again, it goes back down to like math, probability, and whatnot. But understanding those tools and what to put where and plug and play is not as easy as it sounds. And the other thing that I've been noticing recently, and I think this is a great movement towards, is that we as practitioners started to put a lot more emphasis on the data and the appropriateness quality of data, as opposed to it has been mostly about algorithms and, you know, which algorithm is better, which is the latest, which is the greatest. But now we are looking more into the data and realizing like all those canonical data sets that we have used to make our more recent but initial leaps, such as in vision and NLP and whatnot, are actually quite flawed. And we really need to go back and look into the data before we even worry about algorithms. So understanding the basics, I think, is not something anybody can get away with if they want to succeed in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. No matter how many abstractions are available, right, you need to know the basics in order to tune yourself to the right solutions. Koyuki.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to the data, point, right? So 2 things, right? One is, yes, emphasize on the data. I mean, you expect 80% of your time spending on digging into data, right? Understanding the data data lineage, ingestion, like all of that, right? Like cleanness of the data hygiene, all of that. So you expect a lot of like legwork, dirty work, not like as sexy as you think, hey, creating a new algo transformer, right? It's not going to be like that every day. Yes, 20% of your time will be spent, for instance, applying a transformer. Recently we're actually using this BERT4REC for our recommendation engine, which is, the first almost transformer that we're actually testing our data, right? So it actually works wonderfully just because, hey, we're dealing with a lot of messy data and then the data richness is not there. But BERT4REC just happens to be the sequential model, which will only, for instance, look at one piece of content as one ID. We'll actually only look at the sequence of the content consumption, which, worked wonderfully, right, for whatever data that we have, as opposed to some like very, contextual like neural networks, right, that are out there, highly complex. We tried those, didn't work, right? So first point is data. 80% of your time, or even not more, will be spent on data, right? And two is explainability, right? Explainable AI is a hot topic right now. It's like, hey, you can actually apply a very sophisticated model, but then you don't know what the heck is going on inside that model, right? Like, how do we actually bring the explainability or the transparency of what each layer is doing to the forefront, right? Like, those are the things I think that are something that less sexy than you will expect, but that's reality. That's the ugly truth, but it's still fun, right? I personally think that understanding data, making sure that your data is clean is what you will expect. You can actually find a lot of insights. It's more about analytics, it's more about data science type of work, but I think it's absolutely required. You can actually draw a lot of interesting insights from your data, and then those can lead to quick wins, right, to the business, right? You don't have to create a very sophisticated machine to move the needle. Something very simple can do, right? Why, do something that's more complex than you need, right? So there is that balance that you want to strike. And then I use this like example of like OODA loop, right? OODA. So observe, orient, decide, and act, right? So don't just like have your roadmap like already in your head. It's like, yeah, I'm going to create a transformer, but no. Think about what's needed for the business, right? Start from there. Observe, orient, decide, and act.
The OODA model. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for highlighting explainability. Certainly that's where we are moving towards. People are giving more and more weight to algorithms being explainable than algorithms being accurate. So on the same front, let me ask a follow-up question, and either of you can respond to that. So what type of problems are good candidates for machine learning solutions, and what type of problems are not?
I can go, right? The types of problems that are perfect for machine learning is like repetitive stuff, right? It's like, hey, like some sort of like pattern extraction from like massive data set. If the data is labeled, that's great, right? And then I think that is the best use case for AI ML repetitiveness, right? Like somewhat labeled, right? But on the other hand, the one that's very hard is like, I would say, think about CAPTCHA, right? Like sometimes when you sign in, like, you have like, a few seconds, right? Like when you verify that you're human, not a bot, right? Like you look at this like really weird looking letters, right? And then, you are actually entering the letters, right? So that's actually a human way of labeling the data for them, right? I don't know if you have realized that. And then I used to get really frustrated about this, but now I'm like, yeah, I'm at least contributing to the overarching AI and ML initiative. So I think that type of thing is not really good. Machine or AI cannot really do a good job. Whereas us, we'll just have to kind of like tilt our head and try to look at it and try to make sense out of it. But I think that is another example where like, I don't think that AI is the best lever that we use to label the data, right? So, yeah.
Anyone else would like to share some thoughts?
Yeah, actually, so I'm teaching a class now. I have 150 students who are trying to come up with a project and solve it with machine learning. So I'll just tell you what I'm telling them when they need to pick out a good problem. I basically tell them there's like four things. First of all, the data, right? You have to be reasonably sure that the data you actually have has potential, like has the answers to the questions you care about. And it's amazing how often they look at the data and like, wait a second, I actually need to collect more. The other is kind of related, right? It's features, like you need to understand that they're informative enough, they have enough predictive power. And then I think super crucial, like evaluation, right? You need to have a really clear metric of success, of progress. Like every year we have one student who wants to do some flavor of anomaly detection. And I love anomaly detection, but then I ask them, okay, how are you going to know that you found all anomalies? And they're like, okay, switching to another topic. And the last thing I tell them, and it sounds kind of stupid, but don't confuse stuff that's easy for a computer and easy for a person, especially around natural language understanding and common sense and this kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would like to expand a bit about what Dafna said just now. So, like with common sense stuff, like we need to think about, can I translate the common sense I have into features that machine could understand? So if we have a problem and like you ask two or more human beings, and the first thing I would see is if they actually agree among themselves. Do human beings agree on this particular output? So like something as simple as like a sentiment analysis. If you ask multiple people, do you think all of these people are going to agree on this output? If that is the case, I think we can proceed, one thing. And the next thing is like, if human beings are using their common sense or context to make that, make the label or like make that prediction, we have to think, can I actually translate these ideas into features that machine can understand? If we have a way to translate our common sense and context into features that a machine can understand, that is a problem we can go. And yeah, of course, I echo whatever Dafna said for evaluation. We should definitely have an evaluation set up to measure our performance. Yep.
And just to add to what everyone else has said, I think everyone made great points. And one thing that I wanted to add to that is like in industry, from an industry perspective, I think the main goal of machine learning algorithms is to gain valuable insights to a business problem that a company or a product is having. But we can't really apply ML to every single problem, even if we have a huge amount of data, if we don't know what to do with that, and if the data is actually not good quality, like Koyuki stresses a lot, which is significant. And some questions I think we usually ask in the industry, at least in my experience, is like, are there decisions that we are making without consulting data? What makes a process a good candidate for automation? And is it complexity? Is it scaling? Or do we want to have like better customer service and questions like that? And finally, I think this kind of touches upon what Davia mentioned, is like, is there a human benchmark? Can we ask a human to do this task for us? And so that we can base our predictions and whatever algorithm and tool that we are going to be applying to the problem based on that human benchmark. I think that is a good place to start to see what problems we can automate and not. And just to give an example about chatbots. So chatbots started pretty naively as FAQ tools, and a lot of people hated them because they were not able to answer questions that they were asking, and they were so mechanic and were not really useful. It's getting a lot better right now, and now we started to call them conversational assistants as opposed to chatbots. But still, if this assistant or chatbot, whatever you want to call it, is not trained and trained with good data and is not able to adjust and improve the learnings, it's not a good solution, even if we can use it and we can apply it. There are very successful examples of chatbots and assistants, and there are also not so good ones. So.
Well, that's cool. I didn't realize that improved chatbots are now called conversational assistants. That's really cool to know. And great points made for testing and for human benchmarks. Thank you all for sharing that. The next question is actually one of the most popular questions at the time of registrations. When our audience registered, there was a field for them to ask any question of the panelists. And this one came up in various flavors, which is, what are some of the opportunities and challenges with the machine learning focused careers? Open to forum. Maybe Fatma, we can start with you.
Sure. I guess one of the opportunities that is probably more relevant than ever is the need for skilled workforce. We need a lot of people. We need everybody on the table right now, because I think now it is really a great time to get into the field and equip yourself with the information and knowledge of the field to get better at it, if that is something you are interested in. And the field needs diverse perspectives and expertise to optimize the tools and applications we are creating for the benefit of everyone. If you don't have everyone on the table, if you're not consulting with different disciplines and not collaborating, we are going to end up having some issues that actually we have already seen examples of it. And when it comes to challenges, I think we are still figuring out a lot of the things in the field, and we are still at the very beginning and like really premature stages of a lot of the subdomains of AI and ML. And while doing so, we might end up creating some tools and applications that can cause irreparable damages to domains, knowledge of science and fields and whatnot. This is one of the challenges that I think we still don't know how to solve. Like, we are making progress for sure, but you can think about regulations, like how do we regulate it? We can think about biases. We have been talking about a lot of these during the last few years, but still we don't really have like quite good solutions that we can expand upon.
Thank you. Divya?
Yeah, so I'll start with the challenges. The very first challenge I see in this machine learning field is keeping up with new trends or algorithms. Like, how many papers can we read, or like how do we keep up with what's happening? So, like, no matter how hard you try to read, you always feel like there is something you don't know, and this is one of the challenge I face. It's always like, okay, there is something or there is not even something. There is so much I still don't know. And the good thing is that, like, knowing the basics matters so much. Like when you're on an interview, like most of the times, like the interviewers look for how much you know, how much you're good in your basics. Maybe you mess up here in a transformer model. Like maybe you're not explaining BERT very well, but I think you should be really good in linear regression, logistic regression, things like that. So if you are actually looking for a machine learning career, I would recommend to just start with the basics, like be thorough on basics, which is going to open up so many opportunities for you for starting a career as a machine learning person. And as previously mentioned, there are like issues like bias, explainability, and it's a good thing that many industries are taking that seriously and working towards like explainability and building models that are like not biased, things like that. And yeah, so say for example, we are, or at least I am currently working on a project where we do have the predictions for the model. So let's say it's a classification task, and we are working on an AI explainability task to identify why the model is predicting correctly. So though we have challenges, it's also good that companies or other researchers are thinking about it. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dafna?
Yeah, so totally agree with what's been said so far. In particular, for what Divya said about how the field is moving so fast, I just have to say that I recently just started blocking time on my calendar for like read, write, and think. Otherwise, I feel like every time I blink, there's like 1,000 more papers that I absolutely have to read. So I know it sounds weird, but it has been working for me. I'll add one challenge from the point of view of academia, is that a lot of the data, a lot of the resources, like the pre-trained large language models, right, GPT-3 and stuff, are in industry. Right, so often I read a paper and I'm like, oh, this is cool. I know exactly what I want to do next, what I want to try next, but there's nowhere else I can get my hands on the data unless like I send a student to do an internship there or something like this, which has been super frustrating because there's so much fun to be had. I don't know how to solve it, but I just wanted to say this.
Yeah, I can actually add. I think that I don't want to use challenge. I will say opportunities, right? In terms of opportunities, I feel like ML ops. I'm hiring, by the way, all the time. So ML ops, auto ML, right? So ML ops, obviously, I mean, creating a model is great, creating a model, but then, hey, shipping a model, that's only the start of that journey, right? Like your model lifecycle management, so to speak, right? How do you then promote a better model? How do you retire older model, like worse models, right? Like all of that requires a lot of ops chops engineering chops, right? Whoever can actually be good at that, I think you are going to be employable for a long, long time, because I can't really find good ML ops developers. Not a lot of them are out there, right? So, and also auto ML, how do you actually automate all these? I mean, obviously Google has all these like, different criteria for each level of auto ML, right? That you can go up, but I think that not a lot of engineers or machine learning engineers can actually do that. So if you can actually get into that field and be good at that, I think that will be a huge opportunity. I actually think that totally agree with the, the rapid, publication, the speed of publications and all these new knowledge. But I think that, yes, whoever can actually at least be good at one field, either it's NLP, right, that you're actually good at, for instance, all the GPT stuff, or like zero shot, like BERT algorithms. I think that if you can find your niche, right, and know how to apply it, I think that can be a huge lever for you. And then I think that on top of that, just having the entrepreneurial mindset is super important. By the way, I am an entrepreneurial, and then I am a public speaker and as well. So I think that being able to really sell your ideas, right? So because a lot of the developers, a lot of the data scientists and analysts, they're not really, and some are good storytellers, right? But not a lot of them are. They don't really have the sales almost skill set. But being mindful of that can be tremendously helpful for you as well. That's just one opportunity where how do you actually work with the PMs? How do you work with the salespeople, marketing people, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like, hey, your knowledge is only as good as whatever that you can deliver, whatever that you can share with others, right? So that's another area where I think that the opportunity is.
Yeah, beautifully said. Your knowledge is as good as it can be delivered or understood by others. Absolutely. All right, for our audience, please feel free to write in and send any questions that you have for our panelists. We will be moving towards that in a few minutes. So let's ask another question that also came up quite a bit during the registration phase. It's like, because we are ACM women and one of our main objectives is to celebrate and encourage women in the technology field. So a question for all of the panelists, that as a successful woman in tech, what advice will you have for those entering the field, or perhaps they are at an early stage in their career? And we can start with Divya.
Yeah, so I'm in my very beginning of my career. I've started my career just a year back. And one of the advices that my manager gave me was, do not be afraid to speak up. So like I'm in my second project after joining, and in my first, so as I mentioned previously, we work too much with legal data, and I don't understand legal data. I don't understand a case when I read it, but then I'm kind of hesitant to ask several reasons. English is not my first language, and maybe I assume, okay, maybe this is a trivial thing everybody knows about legal stuff. Maybe I just don't know. So I was thinking, I was trying to understand legal stuff on one side, and I was trying to do my job. So right now, and I suffered in my first project. So right now, if I have a question, I just ask people around me. And to my surprise, it's not that everybody knows everything, right? Like when you are in the very beginning of your career, you assume that everybody knows everything. It's just you who don't know anything. But honestly, it's like, especially in my case, like we are all computer science persons, and why would people know about legal stuff? So this is just an example. And for anything that comes, like any challenge you have, like I would recommend to ask for help. You would be surprised to see how people are helpful. So that is one takeaway I would like to tell you. Like whenever you feel down or whenever you are uncertain, just ask for help, and there will be people to help. Most of the times, yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Nice. Yeah. Dafna?
Yeah, mine is actually on a similar note, I think. Okay, and it's also, I know it's easier said than done, but I still think it's important. It boils down to knowing what your worth, like knowing your value. Like a couple of years ago, I applied to a mega grant. Okay, some super important grant, lots of money involved. the university cares so much about it, they actually hired an expert consultant focusing just on this type of grant to, read my draft, give me comments. And like 2 weeks before the deadline, I send this guy a draft and he replies, and I'm going to quote, I read this email so many times, I know it by heart now. He writes, "This is rambling shamblings. Do not send this, it's going to actively hurt your career. Talk to me urgently." And I'm like, okay. And I read it over and over again. I'm like, but this is a good application. This is a good one. I know it. I've read many. I've written many. I know it's good. And I go to some professor friends of mine and I tell them, I need a reality check right now. Like, read this. Is this like legit? And they read it and like, yeah, that seems like a good one. So I actually send it out and I get the money. But I just think that if I was a little bit less sure, like if this had happened 2 years prior, this would have been enough to completely shake my confidence. Like I would just give up the whole thing. So, believe you know something or go ask people that you trust, but doesn't make sense.
I love that example, right? Like I would have just told him like, buzz off to his face, right? We're too nice.
Go ahead, Koyuki. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I just love that example so much. That's why I wanted to really say. But I think two things, right? One is have a network mindset, right? You want to learn from your network. You want to create, right? Be mindful of creating a powerful network. And I actually didn't know this until recently, and I learned this in a really painstaking way, right? So I would say, find mentors, find mentees, right? Hopefully, you learn from your mentors and pass that on, right? Like teaching or mentoring someone is the best way of learning, right? And then also you want to, connect with successful people that you can actually relate to and then get their advice, right? Be proactive in creating your own powerful network, have a network way of learning, right? So that to me is the most powerful way. It's the most practical way of learning, not from medium. I mean, that's useful too, right? Reading and all that, but through people, right? And that is so important because they will create opportunities for you, and in the end, you will actually be able to create opportunities for others as well, right? So that's how we can grow and learn. Another thing is like, we're women. I mean, I'm an outsider, by the way. I'm a contrarian. Like I didn't grow up here. I didn't grow up in Canada, not US. I grew up in Asia, right? So, use the perceived disadvantage that you see, right? For instance, hey, English not being my first language, like whatever, right? Or being female. Use that as your advantage, right? Turn that around. Because that we're women, we have different perspective. We have a different view of seeing something, right? Use that, focus on that, right? And focus on your strengths and forget about your weakness, right? Like, I mean, I often say this to my teams, like, focus on what you're good at, right? And then let the rest slash and burn, right? Because that's how the things that you're good at, for instance, like you can just do it with your eyes closed, it's just seamless, right, to you, just so easy for you. Focus on those things and try to be better at those things, right? So those are the two things that I wanted to really share because I didn't learn those until recently. So I'm not, by no means, I'm not expert, right? So
that reminded me of a quote that I recently read, that we are so focused at times on fixing our weaknesses that we completely forget to improve our strengths or build upon our strengths. Yeah. So thank you for saying that.
And also one more thing I saw, right? It's like,
Go ahead.
Care less about what people think about you, right? I care so much about, hey, if maybe that person hates me, right? If that person says something to me, maybe that person hates me. Forget about that, because most people don't even like themselves. Don't worry about what people will like or dislike you, right? Focus on what you're good at, what your value is. So.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that. I love everything you said, Koik. I'm so sorry, but I just want to second the mentorship part. It's such a rewarding experience if you can actually mentor others, and if you can find a mentor, go find a mentor. It's really not that difficult. There are a lot of people, mostly women, who are willing to pay it forward in this field. And I am actually chairing a mentorship program, and I can't stress enough how much I have learned from my mentees. And it's just go find a mentor.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Okay, taking a question from the audience. It has been submitted by Alicia Wong. And by the way, I was told that the ACM Women chapter from Cal Poly Pomona is watching this session live. So hello, everyone. And it's called She Codes. So hello, everyone from She Codes. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully you are getting some knowledge out of this. So Alicia asked a question about what's the intersection of machine learning and ethics these days that people are focusing on? Any one of you who would like to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I could chime in if
I
you
can.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Koike.
No worries. I feel like I talk too much whenever I get too excited, but please.
Like you're saying great things. And I think when it comes to ethics, we are all learning a lot about it and becoming more and more conscious about it. A few years ago, probably it has been mostly, okay, which one's the fastest and the best algorithm? But today we need to start thinking about what is the societal impact of this tool or this algorithm that I'm working on or disseminating. So I'll just keep it short and give Koike some time to answer as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I can use some examples from Headspace, right? I mean, right now we're trying to make sure that the algorithm has no bias, right? I mean, that starts from like, hey, collecting data, right, at scale, right? Because we didn't have demographic info until like recently. So we're looking at those data points and also like having the right checkpoints, right? So that means, hey, you have to make some tough decisions, meaning sometimes a model can actually be, really good in terms of accuracy, precision, recall, right? But then in terms of the bias, right, has a lot of bias, maybe it's skewed towards certain demographics, right, like ethnicity or gender, right? So that's not good. So you kind of have to be able to make those tough decisions by saying, hey, even though this model is performing better than the others, but because this model is highly biased, because we all often talk about this model personality, so to speak, right? This model is like a rock star, but very discriminatory, right? Like we don't want that. We want to instead choose something that is maybe less, of a rock star, but more fair, right, than the other model. So I think that, hey, collecting data is great, having the right checkpoints is great, but at the end of the day, you have to make those tough decisions. You have to say, hey, I'm going to let go of this, right, my engagement, retention, maybe conversion as well. So that's going to hurt, right, the bottom line of my business, but that's okay, right, because I want to, optimize for the fairness of the model as well.
I want to add 2 quick points, like super quick ones. First is sometimes I think computer scientists cannot do this alone. Like we really have to bring in people who study this for a living, right? People from the software sciences, people who actually study ethics. The other thing, I think sometimes people confuse between like a problem you can solve with technology and a problem that's more like a society problem. Kind of like, there's 7,000 people trying to solve fake news. But I'm not sure that if the problem is actually a technological one. So just wanted to bring those up.
Totally. Sorry, I forgot. Yes, that's a great point, right, Dafna? So I think that at Headspace, we have this committee, right, like which we're inviting like everyone, like D&I, design and product, and also engineering and like ML, like. So we actually formed this. Again, it's very nascent, very new still. We have a team of 10, that is, those people are actually sitting in the committee, right? It's AI ethics or AI, fairness AI committee, so that we can actually make decisions. But again, a lot of competing priorities, right? It's not like, we figured that out, right? No one has the silver bullet. I mean, even Google doesn't have it, right? So, but yes, I agree. We have to get everyone. We have to bring everyone along.
Yeah, I would like to add a very small point. So instead of leaving the ethics to like everybody except us, I think we should also take responsibility. If you are one of the researchers who if you're releasing a data set, are you sure your data is not biased? So like we do have several tools and several papers to solve this ethics problem. Like say, for example, you can release a data statement when you release a data set. So it's going to say what's happening, who annotated this data set, things like that. And you can always have a model card with the models that you release, be it in an industry. So like what are the parameters you used? And think about things like should I actually build a transformer-based model for a 2 points increase in performance? Let's say I get 50% accuracy, or maybe let's say I get an 80% accuracy using a very simple model, and I'm getting an 82% accuracy with transformer. Is it even worth it? Should I add to the carbon footprint? I think we should also take responsibility. I know there are some problems that we cannot solve by ourselves, but if you are into the machine learning research field, take responsibility and do not use models with a bajillion parameters, and don't, So I think we should also take responsibility there. All of us.
Can I add one thing to this that's a little bit more technical than the discussion has been so far? But what you said about taking responsibility, I keep thinking one of my favorite examples is they released a data set of Netflix that was as anonymized as it goes, right? People just had an ID and the movie rating and the timestamp, and it seems bulletproof. But then other people found a way to de-anonymize this by using another database of the same people rating movies. They actually managed to find some names. So should you feel bad as the original researchers for releasing this? Because I would have never ever thought you could de-anonymize this.
Kind of like the counterfeiter, right? It's hey, who is outsmarting what, right? I think it's going to be a constant struggle, ongoing struggle, right? We'll do our best, but it's not like we can solve this all together, right? So,
yeah. Divya, if I may ask a follow-up question that stems from your suggestion that do we really need a model with tons of parameters? What are the trade-offs there? What would be your thoughts on the principle of parsimony for machine learning algorithms?
Yeah, that's funny, because when I first came to industry, I was thinking everybody's going to build transformer-based BERT model. That was my understanding. So at least in what I'm working, especially as maybe I'm into legal stuff, start always with the basic. You'll be surprised what a TF-IDF model could perform. So I would like to tell you a story. So there was this one product that was performing really well, and the customers were happy, and everybody was happy. And we are working on a similar product with making use of all these fancy machine learning and NLP algorithms. So I was thinking, what is happening in that particular product, and why is everybody happy? So when we went there and dig back, they were just using a simple TF-IDF model. And right now, the moment you get a data set, people think about implementing something using BERT. So I would say most of the times, at least in the industry setting, right, the performance, at least from what I've seen so far, is they are very close, or maybe there are a very few point improvement in performance. And when we connect that with ethics, we need to think, is it worthy enough to put in production a model with these many parameters? Should you even spend time in improving the performance, making use of so much transformer-based models? Yeah. So yeah, I stick to, I think I'm still old school. I stick to developing several features. I talk to the subject matter experts. So again, I'm coming back to the legal stuff. We speak with professional legals, legal professionals like attorneys and lawyers once in 2 weeks, and we try to get information from them, and then we build features. So it's also funny that there might be some obvious features that these people can help us with, but it would take us a really long time to get that information from them. In their head, computer scientists and people from a very different background, people who are non-computer science people, think in a very different way. And if you have to get information from them, you should also learn how to communicate with them to get those features. So yeah, me personally, I will always stick to smaller versions of models with a bunch of useful features. And that is what I've seen in the company too. But yeah, my career is very short, so have that in mind as well.
Yeah, I can relate so much to that, because the company that I work with, Doximity, that makes its products for clinicians, so medical professionals, doctors, nurses. So that's also a very niche domain. They have a lot of background knowledge, the clinicians, that we don't have. And sometimes this thing, which is so obvious to them, it takes us days to figure that out. So certainly context, background knowledge, domain expertise, and then just start with building something simple based on that, and then go as complex as need be. Another question from the audience. What is the best way to network with successful people in AI or machine learning fields? Is LinkedIn used much by either of you? Any other suggestions?
I mean, you're doing that now, right? Sending this is a great start.
Yeah. So I don't use LinkedIn. I mean, I have a LinkedIn. I open it like once every 6 months or so. I recently got into Twitter. There's a lot of stuff happening on the ML scene and the NLP scene on Twitter. When we still used to have conferences, my go-to answer would be just go to a conference. I tell my students that they have to have lunch with somebody they do not know every single day. Like, I don't know, go find somebody, tell them, hi, let's go, have fun together, go to the poster session, find somebody you want to talk to, their captive audience. So yeah, I miss conferences so badly. Like Zoom conferences are just not the same.
Yeah, I also think LinkedIn is a good start, and especially now in our world, everything is virtual. So that's a good start. And attending conferences, going to webinars, asking questions, and making yourself visible to the people you want to reach out to is a good way to go about it. And sometimes even sending cold messages, a lot of people get back to you. Some may not, but it's worth the shot.
Yeah. I also say that's great, right? So I also say that start from your own like current network, right? Like your friend's friends, maybe your manager's friend, right? Like someone that you can get some sort of warm interaction will be great, right? So yeah.
The same with me.
And actually, one more thing that might be important: have a GitHub profile, like contribute to project that goes surprisingly, like gets you lots of mileage.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And start your own Medium blog, right? Writing as well.
Yeah, blogging is a great way to get yourself out there. And for any members in our audience, whether you are listening live or maybe on demand later, if you would like to connect to either of us on LinkedIn, please feel free to do that. Just add a note in your request that you attended the session and you would like to connect further, and all of us will be honoring that. And our LinkedIn's are on the registration page as well. All right, so for our audience, one request. So on your screen, you will be seeing a link to a feedback form. It's a very simple, small feedback form. I know because I designed it, will not take more than 2 minutes, but that will really help us figure out what we are doing, whether it's helpful to you or not, or what kind of topics we can talk about in the future that you would like to listen. So if you can please take 2 minutes and fill that out as we are continuing our conversation, I'll really appreciate that. All right, coming back to our panel. So Koyoki, I know that you do a lot of mentoring for students and people who are new to the field as well. There is a lot of anxiety sometimes about getting in. People don't know if they are good enough candidates for machine learning or AI careers. What will be your advice to them?
Yeah, great question. I'll say first, right? Are you going to persevere? That means, hey, are you intrinsically passionate about this field, right? I think it can go a long way, right? So because things can actually get really hard, it is going to be really hard. So for you to be able to persevere, I think you have to love what you do, right? So the second one, I think that, do you actually have the basic technological kind of skill set? It doesn't mean that you have to be able to code like there's no tomorrow, but like basic analytical skills, statistical skills, and then the ability to learn quickly, right? The learning ability is so important, especially this, because the space is evolving so fast, right? Like, do you have the appetite and an ability to learn on the spot, right? And apply on the spot, right? So those are the things I'll look for. And also communication skills, obviously, right? And then storytelling, skill set, right? You have to be able to sell your ideas. You have to be able to sell your own creations, right? So, I mean, those are the three things I look for in terms of someone's potential.
Beautifully said. Dafna, any advice or final thoughts from your end?
About the machine learning, I'll say one thing that's kind of weird, but connects to this whole point about building a network. It doesn't just have to be the immediate suspect kind of network. Like I try to go once a year to an unusual conference, usually more than once a year. Like I've given talk to Supreme Court judges. I went to the International Humor Conference, like all kinds of crazy events. And you never know who you're going to meet and what you're going to talk about and what's going to click in your head maybe like 2 years later. So just, go out and have fun. I guess that would be the message.
Thank you. Divya, any closing thoughts?
Nothing. It's just that do not be afraid. If there is nothing to lose, just go do it.
Succinctly and well put. Fatma, any final advice from you?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself for a second. I guess I have a few words for those people who are questioning if they can be successful in the field of ML. I think the one thing that I want them to hear and remember is that the field needs you and your unique set of skills. And there has been probably no better time than now to join the field and just take the leap and start learning.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Divya, Koyuki, Fatma, Dafna, for sharing so much wisdom and good thoughts with us in the last 1 hour. Thank you, our audience, whether you're listening live or on demand, for being with us for the last 1 hour. Please do share your feedback with us. How did the session go? And what type of careers or career paths or choices you would like us to focus on in the future as well? So we hold a career Celebrating Technology Leaders web session once every 2 months. So hopefully we'll see you in December and January timeframe. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, audience. Thank you, panelists. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.